This is a quick video on how to set up a VEGAMET tank gauge controller using the VEGATools software. So once we're in the VEGATools app on our smartphone, we go to Setup and Diagnosis of Devices. We find the device we want, click it, and we enter the setup. On screen, you can see the current measured value. Tapping the current measured value will change the display to show it as scaled, height, percentage, etc. We then can click into the setup button, which will take us into the setup screen. Here we can change the device name using the device tag, so we can give the device a name such as diesel tank 1 Vega gauge, or something similar. And we can go back and into the application screen. The application screen is a quick wizard, so we can click on application 1, change the type to level storage tank, click next. We can give measurement loop 1 a name. This is the incoming sensor loop, so we will call this tank 1 diesel, for instance. We can then choose to suppress negative values and click next. Now we tell it the type of sensor we've got connected. The options are shown on screen. We'll choose radar, because in this case we're using a radar probe. We want to set it up in millimeters. And then we know that the radar probe we have has a 15 meter or 15,000 millimeter max range, so we can input that. Go next, and then we're going to choose what the tank looks like. Is it linear? Is it a horizontal cylinder? Or do we want to go even more detail and go use programmable? When we choose that, we can choose to use a calculation assistant, which will create a bearing table. We can input a bearing table if we have that already. We'll use the calculation assistant. So we tell it the vessel type, in this case horizontal cylinder, and we want to put our measurements in millimeters. So now we're going to just give it the data it asks for. What's the internal diameter of the tank? In this case, it's a 2-meter tank. We can change the length of the tank. We can change the inclination. We can choose what the one end of the tank is. Is it a dished end? Is it any type of other end? What's the wall thickness of the dish? And what's the board height, which you can see on screen. So we'll put in this case, we will choose in this case a board height of 10 centimeters or 100 millimeters. Click next, and it's going to take us to the next screen where we're going to choose the other dished end. In this case, we'll put it's the same type, 100 millimeters. Just going to go back and check what we put before. Yeah, 3 millimeters and 100 millimeters. Okay, then we're going to click next. We're going to choose a blank out range for the top and the bottom of the tank if we want to, and click next. And then we're going to tell it the empty distance from the bottom of the sensor to the bottom of the tank. In this case, we've got a 10mm socket on the tank, so we're going to choose 2010, and you'll see it's created a calculation chart for that tank. So you don't even need the dimensions or a calculation chart for that kind of tank. Click OK, and we're done with that screen. Next, we're going to choose for the first relay in the gauge how we want the relay to activate, and there's various options. We could choose overfill protection, where the relay is active until it reaches a certain height, where it deactivates, and then it will reactivate at a lower height. Or we can choose dry run protection. There's various options we can choose here. We can choose a switching window mode, and we can choose if it's done by percentage or by volume. Or we can, there's various options here for the relays, and in fact we can change the other relays later on. Don't have to do it in the quick setup menu. Once we've chosen our mode, we can choose the switching points. So in this case, we want dry run protection to basically kick in at 20% and end at 80%, for instance. So we'll put 80% in and 20% in. We click, or we might choose, say, 80%. Now we can choose by clicking next how many measured values we want on the screen. So we can choose one measured value or two measured values, and then for each measured value we can choose if we want that as a scaled, as in this case litres, or as a percentage or a linear percentage of the overall tank volume. Once we're done with that, we click OK and next, and then we click finish, and all of that data is transferred via Bluetooth to the VEGAMET gauge. So this can be done remotely in the warmth and safety of your vehicle or an office on site, as long as you're within Bluetooth range. We can also change other options within the screen, so we can see the sensor information that's currently being displayed. And we can see the exact details of the device we are connected to. And if we go to setup again, and this time to the display menu, we can change some more details on this display. We can change the language. And in fact, you can have up to 3 screens on the display, which you can either have auto scrolling, or we can have there's a left-right button on the actual user interface on the front of the gauge, which we can then switch screens. So if we wanted 2 screens, for instance, we can then choose for each screen how many measured values on each screen, and what those measured values are. So in theory, you can have up to 9 different measurements displayed on screen if you have multiple sensors. We can also change the color of the screen when it fails. So in this case, it's red. We can make it flash red when there's a failure. And we can also change the color of the entire backlit of the screen, depending on, say, for instance, the sensor value. So in this case, we're going to set 3 different colors. So we're going to have it orange when the tank is up to 20% full. We're going to have it white between 20% and 90% full. And we're going to have the screen turn red when the tank is up to 110% full for an overfill scenario. So the entire backlit screen will now be orange when the tank is below 20%, telling people that they're low on fuel, white between 20 and 90%, saying the fuel level is good, and red when the fuel level is over 90%. We can also, if we wanted to, choose, we don't have to choose their preset colors, we can choose any color we want by using the slider or by inputting the hex code into the display. Makes it a very powerful, really easy visual way to see what's going on the gauge.